What if I told you that somewhere out there in the world was a treasure worth close to $1 billion just sitting there for the taking, largely unguarded and unclaimed by anyone who actually has access to it? It's a treasure that grows more valuable each day, but if you got your hands on it, you could potentially sell it without anyone ever finding out. I can also tell you where this treasure is and how to get it. But first, let me tell you how it got there, because the story is so anxiety-inducingly nightmarish that if you were to get your hands on this treasure, it would essentially make you the hero of a modern-day Greek tragedy. Or perhaps the villain. Welshman James Howells was a 28-year-old computer engineer in 2013 when he accidentally ruined his life. Howells had been an early adopter of Bitcoin shortly after it had been first conceptualized in 2008. Bitcoin, as you are probably aware, is a digital currency or cryptocurrency. But Howells' interest in Bitcoin was not purely just because he had a background in computing. He was an ideological supporter of decentralized cryptocurrency as the future of money, having grown disillusioned with conventional fiat currency after the global 2008 financial crisis. Howells started accumulating Bitcoin in 2009, and things were very different back then. Very few people had heard of Bitcoin, it held very little value, and very few merchants accepted it as a form of payment. It was really just a hobby for people who liked the idea of cryptocurrency. So when Howells explained to people that his Dell laptop was mining Bitcoin for him, no one had any clue what in God's name this egghead was talking about. That's all changed now though. Well, people probably still don't know how mining works. To vastly oversimplify it, as a digital currency, Bitcoin needs computer processors constantly running and solving computationally complex problems to maintain its network. You can essentially lend your computer's processor to aid in this process in the network, and in return, you'll be rewarded some Bitcoin. Today, there are so many users of Bitcoin, making the network so computationally intensive, you'd really want an entire warehouse of processors dedicated to Bitcoin mining on an industrial scale for it to be profitable for you. It would take an average American household well over 10 years to mine a single Bitcoin, in which time you'll have spent more money on electricity to keep your processor running. In 2009 though, Howells was one of only 5 miners on the network, meaning it was much less complex and computationally intensive than it is today. Howells could mine 400 to 800 Bitcoin by leaving his consumer-grade laptop mining overnight for 2 months, an incomprehensible achievement today, but also unthinkable today. It was worth almost nothing. By 2013, James Howells had amassed over 8,000 Bitcoin, which he kept on an encrypted hard drive after his laptop was damaged. Howells had a number of drives and disks and the like that contained all sorts of data he had accumulated over his years as a computer hobbyist, with most containing data he had recovered from some computer that had long since shit the bed on him. One day in August 2013, during a spring clean, he threw out a bunch of his old drives that had just been gathering dust for years. No prizes for guessing the surprise twist. He had accidentally mixed up the Bitcoin drive with the junk and just thrown $1.4 million worth of Bitcoin in the bin. See, by now Bitcoin's popularity had risen dramatically, and with it, the price. But 2013 wasn't the peak of Bitcoin prices. It was going to keep going. Originally, James Howells had taken the loss well, despite losing out on a huge sum of money. And I can empathize. You may remember this channel very narrowly missed out on $1 million investment opportunity. That money probably would have changed my life, but whatever. I lost out on money that was never in my pocket to begin with, and gained an interesting story. I was destined to be a millionaire, but for a cruel twist of fate. I'm not going to cry about it anymore, and neither was James Howells. For me though, nothing has happened since losing out on the money that would make the loss more tragic. James Howells had to watch the price of Bitcoin skyrocket in the weeks after he had thrown out the drive. By November, his 8,000 Bitcoin would have been worth around $6 million, and Howells decided he could no longer bear to watch. He had to get his drive back. He visited the local dump, the Docksway landfill in Newport, Wales. Here he was distraught to see hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of tons of garbage, enough to fill a dozen football stadiums, and his hard drive was in there somewhere. He explained his predicament to the dump's manager, but Bitcoin was still a bit over the average person's head. Eventually the manager came to understand that Howells had accidentally dumped something worth millions and was sympathetic to him. He explained that the dump had a planned architecture of sorts, and if the garbage had been collected in August, it would have been dumped in a specific section, narrowing the search down to an area 250 meters in length, 250 meters in width, and 50 meters in depth. That was about 40,000 tons of waste. Obviously, this is still a needle in a haystack situation, but Howells was convinced his hard drive could be found. The only problem was he also had to convince the city council, who were not so optimistic. Generally, no city is going to facilitate a recovery effort in a landfill outside of a criminal investigation. If there's a body in there, they'll halt operations and have a look around. If your wristwatch came off in the bin, well, tough luck. The city council told Howells that it would be nearly impossible to find his hard drive, and that by now it was probably corroded and damaged beyond repair, and that they had no interest in helping him recover it, citing cost and environmental concerns. Their stance was basically, if it's found, you can have it, but I'm telling you right now, it's not going to be found. And so began a long battle between Howells and the city council, as Howells tried for years to persuade the council to allow him to search the landfill. All the while, the price of Bitcoin surged up and up. By 2021, James Howells' lost Bitcoin had a value of nearly $300 million. He offered the council 25% of it if they would just let him search the dump, but the council said that would be in violation of licensing regulations. But the Bitcoin now was worth so much, Howells just would not let go of it. The council had made the point that an excavation would cost millions, so Howells went about raising the funds so the council wouldn't have to front the cost. He received significant investments from some hedge funds on the condition that they receive a percentage of the recovered money. Keep in mind the potential payoff here is hundreds of millions of dollars, so Howells had no trouble finding investors and raising funds for the excavation. By this point, Howells had laid out a detailed overview of how the project would be undertaken, aided by a team of experts he had assembled. One team member was the dump's manager, who had now retired and fully supported Howells. Another was a data recovery advisor who had helped recover the black box from the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster. The team estimated there was about a 90% chance of recovering the data if the hard drive was found. To find the drive, they would have machinery sifting through waste, feeding it into detectors that used AI to identify 3D objects. Drones flying overhead could be fitted with similar visual detectors. In this way, the team only had to move the waste. It was the AI that would search through it. Howells had a lot of faith in this project, and he became more aggressive in his legal battles with the council. In 2023, Howells sued the council for 495 million British pounds. His case was basically this: you suggested to me that if it was found, it was mine, but you won't let me try to find it. I've asked many times over the years, I've gone through every legitimate avenue, I've even offered to donate a significant portion of the recovery to you, and still you refuse. You are essentially keeping my very valuable property from me, and you are knowingly still working on the land site, fully aware that any damage to the drive could result in the loss of hundreds of millions of dollars. The council's legal response to this was to suddenly claim the drive had actually become their legal property when it was deposited on their site. Howells' defense denied this, stating that the drive was deposited by accident and therefore there was no intent to transfer ownership. However, the case was dismissed in 2025, with the judge saying Howells' proposal had no realistic prospect of succeeding. I wasn't in the courtroom, so I don't know how it came to pass that a judge told a team of accomplished experts in their respective fields that they didn't know what they were doing. I mean, could they now have told the judge the same thing with equal validity? Honestly, the whole thing seems a bit fishy to me. That Bitcoin is worth over $800 million, and it's just sitting there. There are experts who claim it's possible to recover it, and venture capitalists who believe in them enough to be willing to invest millions. If these people are eager to take the risk, what exactly is the council's problem? They're not going to accept an offer of tens of millions to let someone else search through rubbish because there's some licensing entanglements? In 2001, Ireland introduced a law that said all retail warehouse units in Dublin had to have a floor plan smaller than 6,000 square metres to prevent large stores drawing shoppers away from small local retailers and creating unsustainable traffic congestion. Then Swedish superstore IKEA said, "Jesus, I'd love to open up shop in Ireland and bring all this money with me, but my stores need 20,000 square metres." And the Irish government said, "Money?" and then let them build a 30,000 square metre unit along one of the busiest sections of the busiest motorway in all the country. And I somehow doubt the authorities across the puddle are in possession of many more scruples than our own authorities here, that they wouldn't be falling over themselves trying to get that money. It sounds like there's more to this. Howells suspects the council's supposed environmental concerns are less about the excavation causing environmental damage, and more about the excavation perhaps uncovering a failure to uphold environmental regulations. Maybe the council is afraid an excavation would expose the dump has been illegally mismanaged. Maybe they're just playing the long game and trying to keep the drive in their possession as long as possible. Although they've announced they're shutting down the landfill and capping it over the next 2 years. There's only one thing for sure. This story is going to end rather dramatically. There's nearly $1 billion just sitting there, and if Bitcoin maintains its overall trend, it could potentially be worth a lot more someday. James Howells is obviously fairly determined to get it back. He has a bunch of people on board with him who have a vested interest in doing whatever it takes to get it back. Whatever game the council is playing, they seem to have staked their claim. And then there's all the people like you and I who have no claim to the Bitcoin, but maybe have just as much chance of finding it as anyone else. Who would even know you had it? Selling it would be a bit harder, as Bitcoin transactions are public and monitored. The market would notice if $800 million worth of Bitcoin suddenly started moving again, and alarms would be sounded. If you were particularly savvy, however, you could potentially do it without anyone ever learning your real identity. After all, Bitcoin was developed by Satoshi Nakamoto, who holds about $100 billion worth of the stuff, making him one of the richest people in the world. And nobody knows who he, she, or they actually are. So until James Howells' hard drive is found, Docksway landfill will be a ticking time bomb. With every tick, its treasure grows more valuable, its hunters more desperate, and the stakes grow dizzyingly higher. The only non-spectacular outcome I can predict is that the Bitcoin will lose all its value before it's found and become worthless. And even that is still quite an interesting resolution, even if it's a whimper instead of a bang. The idea that despite all the hands grasping for this unfathomable wealth, it ended up in none of them. This shit's cursed. Well, I just told you how you can potentially make yourself a billionaire for free, so I think it might be advisable to see if there's any other useful information in the hundreds of other videos that I made. You can also subscribe to see more in the future. And seeing as we covered the topic of money, how about giving me some? Join the channel membership to support me monetarily. I lost out on my chance of ever becoming a millionaire, and I've probably left hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table in unaccepted sponsorships. I'm just not a particularly enterprising person. I don't have a business mind that's interested in figuring out all the angles to maximize return. I have a creative mind that's only interested in making things, and then figuring out how best to guilt trip people into giving me money for them. Please! Alright, until next time, stay safe.
All the files that I believed I needed were already on my new computer. The drive was in a drawer on its own after an incident with a previous laptop, and I thought that I'd taken off everything I needed.
Any hesitation, any moment before you chucked it in with the boxes and the bottles to bring down?
As soon as I put it in the bin at home, I had a second thought, in the back of my mind. You've never thrown a hard drive out before. Why start now?